Predator has got to be one of the greatest gaming franchises in recent history. Just about every single game in said franchise is an exemplary example of whatever genre it's set in.
The game we are taking a look at today is AVP the arcade game. As far as I know, this was the very first AVP game. It was created by Capcom in 1993 and ran on the legendary CP System 2 arcade board, the same board that ran Street Fighter II. This board was notable for its extremely heavy encryption, and for the longest time it was thought that emulation was impossible. And it took all the way until 2007 for the encryption to be fully reverse engineered to allow gamers to play these classics once again.
So now, let's take a look at the game that set the precedent for all other AVP games to come.
Gameplay is standard side-scrolling fare that allows for 3 players simultaneous. Why they couldn't go for 4, I couldn't really say. Essentially, all you do in this game is walk to the right and kill anything in your path. Most of the time, this gets really boring really fast, and is monotonous as all hell. However, this does not happen with AVP. The game really never bogs down. All the enemies are highly varied and change as you progress through the game. There are really so many on screen at one time that you're always going to be fighting, so there is no dead space. Now, one of the other problems with side-scrollers is the lack of moves. Usually you just punch or kick or jump kick or things like that. Here, though, you get a large number of moves. You have your main hit attack, which actually looks kind of wimpy looking when you think about it. Then you have the wide area attacks. Usually you'll have 2 of these. For this character here, he usually jumps up and fires his plasma caster down, or twirl his stick around and create a micro tornado. Then there is a slide move, and finally there is a really vicious stomach punch. You of course have a projectile weapon that will overheat if you fire it too much. All told, you are not going to get bored fighting. Now, similar to the Aliens arcade game, you have the driving stages, except here they are tremendously better. Your projectile weapon is now enhanced so that it won't overheat, thus allowing you to fire continuously, and of course similar difficulty to the standard ones, and do add a bit of depth to the gameplay. One thing that characterizes this game is fairness. You have every chance to survive in this game. When you run out of lives and continue, all the enemies on the screen take a hit. And really, the enemies are just at the right level of toughness. They don't feel too weak, but they are not constantly kicking your ass either. Really, the game just feels satisfying. One big issue, though, is with the projectile weapons. Since this is a side-scroller, it is rather hard to aim, and it is very easy to fire both above and below enemies. The soundtrack is also quite good as well, with all of the tracks being rather unique. Although, as I was playing through the game, I just sort of forgot it was there. But listening to it outside of the game, I have to say that they did a great job on the music, and it is worth listening to outside of the game. There are 4 selectable characters. The Predator Warrior, who, in the context of the story, is the leader of these 4 characters. You then have Dutch Schaefer.
Now this, of course, is not the Dutch Schaefer from the first Predator film, and that's mainly because Dutch Schaefer was active in the 1980s, and this game takes place in the 22nd century. So obviously he would have been long dead before the events of this game. Now, in the context of the Predator Expanded Universe, Dutch Schaefer had a brother who worked with the NYPD, and in the course of his adventures against the Predators, he came into contact with a Soviet lieutenant, who happened to be female. And at the end of the book Predator Cold War, they were pretty much a couple.
And it is conceivable that they would get together permanently and have a child who would become this character's ancestor. We then have the Predator Hunter. He is basically the Predator equivalent of Bill Duke's character from Predator.
You're ghosting us, motherfucker. I don't care who you are back in the world. You give up position one more time, I'll bleed you real quiet. Leave you here. Got that?
And finally, we have Lieutenant Rin Kurosawa, a character that is filling in for Machiko Noguchi. She was the main human character from the first AVP comic. The reason that that character is not in this game is because that particular character was on a completely different planet rather than Earth. Now, for this review, we are just going to follow the Predator Warrior as he smashes his way through the hordes of xenomorphs. The power-ups in this game are extremely plentiful, and you can usually find health laying around just about everywhere. But it's just funny that you can beat fully formed meals out of enemies, or out of trash cans laying about.
I didn't think he was vegetarian.
I guess this one could stomach one of those horrid salads after all. In addition to the health power-ups, there are also a huge number of weapons. And here is where we come to the most awesome moment in any AVP production. A Predator using a pulse rifle. Just let that sink in a moment. You can also pick up a number of monetary items as well. Dead Buddy's not gonna need a necklace anymore. As one would expect, the main enemy of the game is the Xenomorph. Except you are not just fighting the same xenomorph type over and over again. Rather, there is a whole plethora of xenotypes you have to kill. Now, midway through the game, you face humans, but it is not in the capacity that you would think. Rather, they are members of Weyland-Yutani's private army, under command of this unnamed fat guy, who is a take on the main villain from Alien's Nightmare Asylum. The humans do shoot back, and they are fairly effective at it. One thing that is kind of idiotic, though, is that some of the troops are armed only with throwing knives. I mean, come on, this is a corporate army, but sometimes downsizing just isn't that effective. There is one enemy that you face that still irks me a bit. You have to face what are called infected humans. That means they are infected with a chest burster, which for some reason makes them attack.
And that is just inaccurate. Chest bursters cannot control humans. It was never seen in any of the films, and it just doesn't happen. And if it did, it would make no sense.
In Alien, the one infected human showed no hostile tendencies to his shipmates. Moreover, he showed considerable torpor before he finally died.
So where did that idea come from? Well, in the Aliens novels, some humans were psychically controlled by the Queens, so that might have led to them thinking that maybe the Queens controlled the humans through the chest bursters. But still, it makes no sense.
Well, that aside, the levels themselves do a very good job of looking like locations from both the films and the expanded universe. Here we have a door that looks like the ones from Alien. Here's a stretch of corridor that looks like the corridors from Aliens. And finally here, we have xenomorphs stored in glass tubes like in Alien's Nightmare Asylum. Overall, the levels are fairly well designed and are quite varied, and they certainly do not get monotonous. At the end of every level there is a boss fight, and the bosses themselves are not all that difficult to take down, even when they have a bunch of foot soldiers backing them up. Now, one of the cooler bosses is the Power Loader, and yes, I did just kill it with a thrown knife. The Predator Warrior is that big of a badass. Now, later in the game, you get to fight what is called a Mad Predator, although in all reality he has just been conditioned by Weyland-Yutani. When you face him as the Predator Warrior, they actually verbally spar with one another. The boss itself is very challenging, and really, it borders on cheap. He moves very fast and takes a lot of damage, but despite this fact, defeating him would have been possible in the arcade. At the end of every boss fight, there is a nod to Street Fighter II. Just listen to this.
I just hope Blanket isn't the next one. I don't know how he can do that damned electric move while going backwards!
And now let's look at the main attraction of AVP, the story. Of all the games that I have played in my 21-year existence, never have I seen a video game story as good as this one, although that opinion may be a bit biased. The story takes place during the events of Alien's Earth Hive. Basically what has happened is, the Xenos have escaped from various labs and are now spreading across the world. The game takes place during the very early stages of the Xeno infestation. The game quite literally takes place base at Ground Zero in Sandrad, California. This is presumably the location of the Bionational Lab where the first alien queen escaped. And take a look at this. The art style in the arcade stills actually match the ones seen in the Aliens comics. We are first introduced to our main human characters, Schaefer and Kurosawa. They are about to be overrun by a large horde of Xenos until some Predators show up in a very bombastic fashion. And yes, in this game they do actually talk, and to simplify things, it is in English. One cool thing here is this Predator reprises the famous line from Terminator. And this, of course, is where the story begins in earnest. What happens for the first half of the game is the two Predators and the two humans team up to take down a queen. There is a lot of text in this game, as you can see here, and it will be different depending on what character you choose. Now, the text reflects the story itself, meaning that no matter if you're playing one or two player, the character will talk as if there's four characters there. After the queen is killed at the halfway point, the game switches gears and follows a fairly standard Aliens plot. Weyland-Yutani is once again experimenting on xenomorphs, and you have to stop them. We also get a new villain, this fat guy who is never given a name. I guess we'll just call him Warlord Zinj. And if you know who that is, I wouldn't admit to it, as it would make you as big a nerd as I am. It is at this point that you start facing corporate soldiers. Later, you face the mind-controlled Predator. Although there is one minor issue with this mind-controlled Predator. The Predators blame the human military rather than just Weyland-Yutani. Also, they say that their tribe was being used for experimental purposes, even though they are supposed to have clans. But it could just be a translation error between the Predator language and English. And besides, I think clan and tribe are basically the same thing. Now, after the brainwashed Predator is killed, the fight goes into space where you finally meet up with the warlord Zinji. But you don't kill him. Rather, he is killed by the Queen. Now, that is some pretty good in-game continuity right there. Also, Zinji is killed in a very spectacular manner that still looks good almost 20 years hence. The Queen even uses her signature move from Aliens. Now, after the Queen is defeated, we get, quite possibly, the greatest arcade ending ever. Our human characters have the ship crash into the alien-infested city, thus buying humanity some time. Now, they escape the ship in a shuttle straight out of Alien, and the game ends with the Predators doing their typical weapons exchange with a final ominous message of, "See you soon." Now that's pretty badass. And it is totally in keeping with the notion that the enemy of my enemy is my enemy's enemy. And the game ends with Kurosawa and Schaefer vowing to fight the Predators when they return. Which unfortunately never happened, as AVP never actually received a proper sequel. There would of course be many other AVP games, but the arcade game would stand alone. And of course, none of the events or characters, sans one, would ever be seen or heard from again. However, Lieutenant Kurosawa would later appear in several Capcom fighting games.
You know what really makes me mad? This game was supposed to be a tie-in to an AVP movie. This game's story could have easily been a bloody movie in and of itself. It merges both franchises really quite well, and for an arcade game, there is a tremendous amount of characterization. I mean, this is an arcade game. You go, you pop in some quarters, and you're done. But they actually went the extra mile and crafted a really great story. You could really adapt this game into a bloody book. Now, as for an AVP film, we had to wait quite some time, over 10 years. And when we finally got a film, it was nowhere near as correct or as good as the story presented in this game.
AVP the film took about 14 years to make, and really has nothing on this game's story. And that's pretty sad when an entire film cannot compete with basic cutscenes and some text. The characters in this movie are bloody cardboard at best. The story is just idiotic beyond belief, and finally it breaks with the whole mythos. The bloody Dunkovs got absolutely nothing right.
AVP was absolutely abysmal. Well, maybe it wasn't that bad, but it still was far from good. We did finally get a fairly decent AVP film made by a marginally proficient director.
The film is not that bad. It still doesn't take place in established continuity, and the Predator doesn't team up with the humans either. To make matters worse, the film is so bloody dark that I can barely tell what's going on. And it's even dark in the middle of a sunny day. I bet it would still be dark on the surface of the bloody sun. It's like they turned the exposure limit down on their cameras in an effort to make this film seem more scary.
It's not scary! It's just stupid!
Despite AVPR's many flaws, the film still has its moments. Like at the very end, there's mention of Weyland Yutani, and it basically explains how they were able to have interstellar ships by the 22nd century. Also, the overall story for the movie actually makes a bit of sense and is far better than the preceding films, but still, they should have set this film in the future where it belongs. Really, I've had enough of this prequel crap.
As should be expected, I do recommend giving this game a download. I even recommend it even if you hate retro games. Really, this game might change your mind on that subject. Hell, I'll even take it one step further and say that if you've got unlimited funds and floor space, you might want to try to find the bloody cabinet. Now for next time, we're going to be taking a look at AVP on the SNES. But for now, this is General Lotz wishing you good Turtles in Time, good The Punisher, the arcade game, or whatever makes you happy.